Ay, magandang gabi. Naririnig niyo ba ako? Hello, 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 hello. Good evening sa inyong lahat. There are 245 right now watching. Okay, okay. Pasensya na kayo na late ng konti dahil merong maliit na bagay na kailangan na kasuhin yung pagligo. Di ba? Nakakainis yung ganun. Kung kailangan mo pang maligo, bakit kaya ganun? Hi. Alright. Maayong gabi. Kumusta mo, tanan? Si Pearl, Ngayon ko lang nakita tong pangalan ni Pearl, Si Heidi, si Mel Bruins. Hello. Kumusta kayo? Awesome G. Yung P diyan, hindi yan Paglinawan. Pogi daw po yan, sabi nila. Hindi naman ako naniniwala din. Alright? Okay. Napag-usapan natin na bago ang lahat, mag-like and share muna siguro tayo. Hindi muna ako magsasalita para makapag-like and share muna tayo. Di ba? Para awesome tayong lahat. Yeah. Elamisha. Is that Elamisha Miki? Is that it? New logo looks. Oh yeah. Kanina wala akong magawa yung may oras ng konti. So gumawa ako ng mga ganun. Hindi ho bago yan. Isa lang yan sa marami. Sa maraming mga natin. Mga kaek-ekan. Hello, Amalia. Si JVD Windsor. Okay. Alright, okay. Kagabi, napag-usapan natin, mga ba yung napag-usapan natin kagabi? Kalimutan ko na. What was that? What the hell was that? Sinong makahula? Sino ang makahula? Everything and various things here and there. Halo-halo na pinag-usapan natin si Talabong. Yata yun pinag-usapan natin kagabi. Was that last night? Yeah, I think so. Si Rambo Talabong in relation to prejudice. Okay, prejudice. Yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon naman is also related to that because ang objective nitong mga first few first 10 live streams dito sa Luminous ay ang ipaintindi sa atin kung ano ang function ng information at ang communication dito sa ating society. Hindi lang sa Pilipinas kundi sa international community. Okay? Not only in the Philippines but also in relation to other countries and other peoples of other countries. Okay. Bakit importante ang impormasyon? Bakit importante ang freedom of speech, expression, and the press? Bakit yan importante? Di ba ang in-exchange naman dyan ay impormasyon. Di ba? So that's public discourse. Okay? Public discourse. Itong ginagawa natin dito, ang pag-uusap-usap ng mga tao sa publiko, whether involving the government, meaning it's the citizens, it's the private citizens talking to the government in a forum. Okay, in a forum meaning we do not limit our ideas of a forum as in a formal uh, establishment or institution na kagaya ng korte o kagaya ng classroom. When we say forum, it means where ideas are exchanged by one or more people. Okay, and especially when opposing beliefs and arguments and theories and persuasions are allowed, okay, to confront each other. Okay, so that's a public discourse. Okay. Why is it important? In relation to the public discourse involving the citizenry and the state, okay, the citizenry and the state, kagaya nung ginagawa ni Presidente Duterte, yung nagdadaldal siya ng napakatagal-tagal sa TV sa ating gabi hanggang madaling araw. Okay. That is one of the examples of a public discourse. But hindi kasi yan interactive, so we could not respond to his speech or the things that he says immediately. But it's a start. It's a start. Kasi dati, noon pa, uh, noon pa lang, yung mga previous governments natin, no, mga administrations, wala pa talagang masyadong chance to interact. But now, meron na. So kahit na yung kay Presidente Duterte sa TV siya nagsasalita ganyan and we cannot interact in real time, makakasagot na tayo kagad because we can already write our emails and fire it off, di ba? Noon, nung mga wala pang internet, ay kailangan pa nilang isulat yan, kasi padala yan sa kabayo or sa kalapati or whatever, or Morse code or smoke signals, ganyan. Matagal. So matagal yung response. And why is that a problem? And why is the speed of interactivity right now is an advantage? Because in a public forum involving the government, okay, or the state and the people, it is the primary space for determining what policies of government, okay, what policies of government would be sound would be sound enough to implement. Okay? Kasi bago ka gagawa ng batas, which is an expression of a policy, tatanungin mo muna yung mga constituents mo. Tatanungin muna. So, ideally, dapat ang mga congressman, okay, mga congressman dapat meron yan silang public hearing doon sa kanilang constituencies, di ba? Sa kanilang mga distrito. Kasi yan yung tinatawag na public forum in the local government, in the grassroots level, where the representative of the people are talking to the principals, to the people themselves, di ba? Importante yan na may exchange. So now we will see that in a public forum, there should be a requirement in a public discourse, a public forum, there is a requirement that there is freedom of exchange of information. Okay, freedom of exchange of information. Na walang binagbabawal dyan para marinig talaga natin ng concern. Kung halimbawa may policy na ipagbawal ang mga terorista sa internet, dapat before gawin yan, nagkausap-usap mo na bakit bawal, paano kami may freedom of expression kami sasagot naman ng gobyerno. We also have the right to preserve and defend the state. Kasi the state, without it, then nobody will defend all of your rights against all the enemies, like external and internal enemies. External meaning other countries or other enemies na hindi Pilipino, or internal, yung mga Pilipinong rebelde. So, there is a very compelling reason why the state is allowed to to sometimes limit the things that we say, but not necessarily our right to say it. So hindi tayo binabawalan ng gobyerno na magsalita, pero binabawalan tayo sa mga pagsasalita ng mga certain things. Okay? Certain things. So that is an example now. That is now the expression that is now being expressed in the libel laws, slander laws, at saka yung tawag dito, malicious publications or yung ano, yung magpa-publish ka ng scurrilous libels against the government, which is actually inciting to sedition, inciting to rebellion, and all that stuff, or inciting to people to disobey the government or to rise against an official, mga ganyan. So, these are the limitations, but hindi naman din palagi yan ang pinag-uusapan pagdating sa paggawa o pag-craft ng policy ng gobyerno at saka paggawa ng batas. Pinag-uusapan na much more specific like, paano kami maapektuhan ito? Yung mga kakalabaw namin, hindi namin pwedeng idaan dyan. Saan na kami dadaan? Imbis na makarating kami sa kahan ng maaga, hindi na dahil sinara niya yung mga ganyan. So, kailangan naririnig yan ng gobyerno. And a much more basic explanation of that is kailangan natin ng impormasyon na galing sa ibang tao because hindi natin kayang kunin ang lahat ng impormasyon na maaaring kailangan natin on our own. Okay? Why? Because we have our own inherent limitations. Like we only have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, diba? And 1 nose. So in other words, if we are going to get the information that we might need for whatever, for decision making or for helping our family member on something, or how to plant rice better, or how to make your Bitcoin grow in profit quicker, mga ganyan. Kung ikaw pa ang maghahanap niyan by trial and error, maring sobrang time consuming at mas maigi nga yung meron kang mga access sa mga impormasyon na mga experiences ng ibang tao so that you can learn from their own mistakes. So you do not have to do your own trial and error. Okay? That is one example of why it is important that we should be allowed to talk to each other. That we should be allowed to talk to each other. Second, or another justification why we should be allowed to speak to each other, not only that we have the freedom to speak, to express, and to publish, but that there should be other people that are on the other side, that listening to us. And when they respond, that we are also listening to them and reading them and perceiving their expressions, di ba? So, pinoprotektahan yan ng ating saligang batas. Okay? That is protected rights. Okay. So ano pa ang mga ibang justification bakit pinoprotektahan 'yan? Ang mga paraan ng solve natin mga problema natin ay apektado ng mga maraming bagay na maaaring hindi natin alam or we are not aware of because they are so deeply ingrained in us. Okay? For example, hindi mo nakikita yung sarili mong mata. Okay? Hindi mo nakikita yung sarili mong mata. I cannot see my own eyes, right? And unless I carry around a mirror everywhere I go, I wouldn't see my own eyes. And if I were staring into the mirror every single minute of the day, then I won't see any other thing but my own eyes. Okay, so may mga bagay na deeply ingrained in us, in our psyche, in our psychology, in our behaviors and attitudes na hindi natin nakikita na nakaka-apekto doon sa paraan ng ating pag-solve ng problems. Like, how do we solve a problem of getting to work quicker? Diba? Yung nakasanayan mo sumakay ng Grab. Kung halimbawa walang masyadong sasakyan na Grab na malapit sa iyo dyan at malapit ka na malate, you now have to problem solve. Ano bang mga solusyon ko? At kung halimbawa, hindi ka sanay na sumakay ng motor, okay? Hindi ka sanay sumakay ng motorcycle, you wouldn't think of solutions like angkas. Kasi ang buhay mo ay sa Makati, ang sarap ng buhay mo, or ang lapit lang ng school, ganyan, or work. And now suddenly you live far away from your school or from your work. Suddenly you have to deal with all these things. And since hindi ka nasanay sa mga ganito, hindi mo yan maiisip agad. Okay, but if you have access to information like on social media, may nabasa ka doon, mga kaibigan mo na subukan na nila sumakay ng angkas, ng kung ano pa man tong ibang serbisyo dyan, like uh, uh, what's this other ride hailing service, yung Uber, mga ganyan. So pag nabasa mo, may Uber pala. So let me just try that. Okay? Or kung nabasa mo na meron din palang angkas. Hindi ako sanay, pero at least ngayon alam ko na meron. Sige, subukan ko ngayon. Eh dumating agad yung angkas ahead of the Uber or the Grab. Sumakay ka ng angkas. Nakarating ka sa opisina mo ngayon ng maaga, on time. So now, you incorporate that learning into your life, in your decision making. And that is the that is the beauty of being allowed to access to a public discourse, okay? Because it not only gives you active and immediate and positive answers to your questions when you ask them. Sometimes, even if you're not asking a question to a problem, you just accidentally see certain things on your wall and you learn something. And you learn something. And if that learning would eventually lead you to solve a problem, imagine if you hadn't learned it there. Imagine if you had to trial and error your way to the solution of your problem when you only have a very limited time. Pero dahil meron kang access doon na even accidentally, okay, even when it's accidental, it's still good. Di ba? It's still good. So, hindi natin siya pwedeng baliwalain na dahil karamihan sa atin when we are really conscious of it, pag nag-Facebook tayo, nag-online tayo, nag-Twitter tayo, ganyan, we just like on our spare time, we think of going on Facebook as something that we do when we are not doing something more important. Diba? But that is rapidly changing now because ngayon, sometimes we do Facebook and Twitter and all that even when we are at work, when we are supposed to be doing what should be to us a more important thing to do. So, nawawala na yung valuation doon. Okay? But going back, our decisions are also affected by things that we do not intend to affect our decisions. Kagaya nga ng inherent biases. Kagaya nga yung example ng motor kanina. Biases are not bad. Biases are expressions of our humanity. And it makes us different from each other. Okay? And they're only bad if we if they factor into our decision making that would lead us to failure. And when that when that decision, which is a failure, affects other people, then we have a really big problem because may masasaktan na ibang tao dahil nag-fail yung decision mo dahil may mga certain things ka sa parte ng buhay mo, ng psyche mo na hindi ka masyadong consciously aware, naapektuhan yung paggawa mo ng desisyon. Okay, so where does a public discourse come in? Well, it comes in when other people see you and they notice the bias and they bring your attention to it, okay, or they bring it to your attention, all right, or vice versa. So that kung wala sana yung ibang tao na nakapagsabing, you know what, I think medyo biased ka dyan dahil kamag-anak mo to or binigyan ka ng pera nito, na sometimes hindi mo na maaalala, hindi mo mapapansin agad or you do not consider it as related to the issue. Pero sometimes when it is other people who do not really care about your issue, just happen to pass by your wall and read it and can say, look, check it out. Baka apektado naman kasi ng bias yung yung sinasabi mo. Baka hindi mo makita ito na may possible problem ka sa unahan ng konti kasi ito ang pinili mo imbis na yun. Okay? May ibang tao ang makapagsabi sa iyo niyan dahil there is no way for you to see your own eyes. There is no way for you to smell your own nose. Okay? There is no way for you to smell your own nose. Or taste your own tongue. Diba? So, mas maigi na may ibang tao na magsasabi sa dila mo parang, parang bisaklat or something like that. So that is what is another good thing about free flowing um, exchange of ideas with other people, with the society. Kasi may mga benefits to na kahit na hindi mo hinahanap, ay maaaring makukuha mo unexpectedly. And we know this and everybody experiences this kind of thing. Buti na lang nabasa ko tong ano sa Facebook nung isang araw. Naisip ko, naalala ko to, and these are very important things. Okay? What else? Another thing would be, uh, okay, when we think, when we process the things that we have in our head, like when we are problem solving or like when we are deciding what to wear, we there are two activities that we do. We get information and we process the information, and the other thing is we consciously look at we consciously monitor how we process the information. Naiintindihan niyo ba yun? Yung parang kumakain ka at the same time tinitingnan mo yung sarili mo na kumakain. So that halimbawa, kumakain ka ng isda na matinik. Ano bang isda matinik? Danggit, ganyan. For example, di kaya bangus. Kumakain ka. Kung ikaw lang ang kumakain, you only have limited senses, di ba? Kain ka ng kain and nobody is watching you eat. Sometimes nakain mo na yung mga tinik and suddenly natinik ka na. Whereas kung, which is also the function of our brain, that we are not only doing something, we are also looking at ourselves doing something. Such that, in a way, parang may third person na noon, oh, mag-ingat ka dahil sa susunod na liko, may ambush dyan. Kasi may isang tao na nakikita na looking ahead while you are busy with what you are immediately dealing with, which is gathering facts. Okay? Hindi tayo conscious about these things. We do not consciously do this, but our brain does. Our brain does. So, parang may nagsasabi sa'yo, and some people call it conscience, or the superego, or the ego over the id. So, parang ganun. If there were other people who can, for example, you are busy gathering facts, and you know that you are going to do something with these facts when you already got them all. But at the same time, iniisip mo na rin kung how to go about processing this thing. So, hinahanap mo yung facts at hinahanap mo yun yung mga instructions na kailangan mo para ma-process mo itong things na to. So, dito, nakakatulong ang public discourse because you are gathering facts and you just search for how to do this. Okay? So, may mga DIY sites, for example. May mga kahoy ka dyan, meron ka ng mga hammer at saka mga nails, mga screws and glues and all that can actually allow you to make a house. But you do not know how to make a house yet. Okay, so it's not only getting information or getting the materials, the resources that you need to do something, but also the means for you to process these resources to achieve your goal. Makukuha mo rin yan sa free exchange of information. Okay, so importante ito. Importante. Okay, what's next? Mabuti rin itong free exchange of information or ideas and opinions because as human beings, we are expected or we are supposed to because it is our biological purpose to always adapt to new situations. And eventually later, if we are really good at it, we can pass it on to our children. And that is now natural selection, di ba? The theory of Darwin. Na sobrang sanay na mga tao na gawin itong ganito, sobrang inherent sa katawan nila at sa psyche nila that they physically give it down to their children and pass it on to their children. Di ba? Kasi mas maraming mga bagay na natutunan natin sa ating lifetime na hindi ganun katindi na magiging part na ng genetics natin. But I am positive that many of the things that we know now that we got from our parents, or we got from our parents by birth. For example, alam natin na, well, many people would say na ang nanay ay hindi niya makakalimutan yung anak niya. Okay? No mother will ever forget her own child. Okay? But the father can. Why? Maybe because in the process of our development as a species, it was so necessary for us to take care of our own children because it will continue our own line, our own bloodline, our own family, our own genetics. So, tayo rin, pag nagkaasawa tayo at nagkaanak, suddenly we just know how to take care of children, small babies and infants. Nobody taught us how to do that. Some people are just really so dense that they couldn't quite figure it out. But for most of us, for most of the women, pag nanganak yan sa bulubundukin, they probably know what to do. They would just come to them. It would just come to them. And before that got ingrained in our psyche, in our attitudes and behaviors, those were things that our ancestors had to learn and to remember every single time kasi hindi pa siya naging automatic, hindi pa siya naging instinctive. But as we go on down the generations, some things that we find out now, first from the public discourse, would already be later on so ingrained in us na hindi na kailangan ng mga anak natin, okay, ang ating mga forebears, hindi forebears, yung ating mga offsprings na aralin pa to because they already know it because we have cultivated in our own brains, in our own genetics so much that we passed it on to them biologically by their chromosomes and all that, diba? Genes. So that's important because it will continue the bloodline of human beings. When we get information where we could have gone to hell and back getting it ourselves, but instead we get it easily by just looking at the screen of our computer, it helps us a lot. It helps us a lot, and even helps our own line of as a species, as human species, to continue living. To continue living. Hindi tayo magiging extinct. Okay? Okay, that's another benefit. What else? What else? Ang public discourse is also the source of emerging rules in how to behave in a society. Noong araw, okay lang ang mga lalaki ay magyosi sa loob ng bahay. Okay lang yun. At kailan lang nagkaroon ng batas na bawal magyosi? Si Duterte lang ang gumawa niyan, di ba? It's not even a law. Okay? It's just an executive order. Yung batas, in fact, hindi nga pinagbabawal ng magyosi. Dapat magyosi lang kayo doon sa isang lugar. Okay? Hindi pinagbabawal ng magyosi. But even before we got there, the development of the belief or the policy na hindi maganda magyosi. Lalo na pag nagyosi ka sa loob ng kwarto kasi there are other people there who are not smokers who would be exposed to the ills of smoke or cigarette smoke or whatever smoke. Diba? We learned all of these things because people were talking to each other. In the beginning, mga taong hindi nagyosi, hindi nila masabi-sabi sa mga taong nagyosi na, Brad, huwag ka naman dito sa loob. Maraming, hindi nila masabi yan. We just really were victims of secondhand smoke by older people when we were children. Di ba? And there are studies that would indicate na ang karamihan sa cause ng bronchial asthma ay yung mga smokers ng mga magulang or exposure to people who smoke as children or when as fetuses, as we were being carried in the body of the mother is exposed to smokers, and it has an effect in the children. Ayun yung mga sinasabi dyan. So, dahil sa social discourse, dito sa public discourse, nagkakaroon ng emerging agreement, okay? Agreement between many people na, okay, so huwag na natin gawin sa loob ng elevator, sa loob ng aeroplano, sa loob ng sasakyan, public vehicles. Kasi merong mga iba dyan na ayaw mag-yosi at ayaw magkasakit. Sila, they recognize that it might get them sick. Ikaw, you don't care about your body, then you commit suicide by smoking far away from our people. Ganyan. And all of these things become a solid rule or even sometimes law because of this exchange of nag-yosi kayo pero may karapatan din naman kami na hindi magkasakit at ayaw mag-amoyosi. And they communicated that, and it was allowed, that communication is allowed and not interfered with. Kaya nagkaroon tayo na ngayon ng mas magandang society because of emerging mores and conventions that we arrived at and we agreed to voluntarily because we were properly informed of the pros and cons of these things from other people that we meet and we talk to in society. Okay, so that's another. Ano pa? Yung public discourse is also a multiplier for hands that look for answers out there so that we can focus our attention on some other things like feeding our children, going to work, and at the same time, other people are coming up with information that can help us, that we can use in our immediate needs. Na hindi na tayo ang maghahanap. That's different from the other one na trial and error because that one is problem solving. This one is just information that you just need in your lifetime na kung inaral mo ito lahat sa eskwela, ay kailangan mong sundin yung hierarchy ng grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, high school, ganyan, college. And some things would not be taught to you in grade 3 because you have to wait to get to college to learn all of these things. But with this now, with this public forum meaning not only the internet but society, when people are exchange ideas like in the store, like in the palengke or in the barbero or all of those things, sa jeep, sa loob ng jeep, or anywhere that we talk to other people. Okay, that is public discourse. It helps us get information that we would have paid so much money or so much time and effort to get ourselves, knowing that we just really need this information and guidance and all that. So information is not only facts, but also information on how to process the information that you get. Okay, so there are instructions on what to do. Nandiyan na nga yung mga gamit mong pagtayo ng bahay, hindi mo alam paano gumawa ng bahay. O kung saan ilalagay yung bubong, kung sa ilalim ba o sa gilid ba o sa taas, mga ganyan. So you also get that. Okay? Now, nagkakaroon ng problema niyan kasi while there is a protection by the state and the Constitution and by communities that meron tayong mga rights, yung speech, expression, to publish, meron din kasing mga nagagawa by exercising these rights na makasama sa state and other people and other citizens in the same community. So magkakaroon ng regulation. But very strict ang requirements ng Constitution on these things. Like for example, yung censorship sa media. Okay? Very strict para ma-allow ang state na gumawa ng batas to restrict the printing of a certain information in newspapers ay strict, hindi mo pwedeng pagbawal yan. So what are the things that are so far upheld by our Constitution to be a valid regulation of the content-wise in speech expression and publication. First, yung unang-unang comes to mind is the um, confidentiality principle, the privileged communication between the lawyer and his client. Hindi mo yan siya pwedeng pilitin na magsalita, okay? Kasi okay, the freedom to speak is has a correlative with the freedom not to speak. Okay? So kung hindi ka pwedeng pagbawalan, hindi ka rin pwedeng pilitin. Okay? But in relation to privilege communication, hindi ka pwedeng pilitin. Hindi ka talaga pwedeng pilitin. At pwede ka rin pigilin pag sinabi mo yan, mapapunish ka. Okay? The lawyers, for example, would be disbarred if they bared the secrets of the clients or whatever there is when they talked about in the engagement of their services with the client. So bawal pati sa mga doktor, ganun din. Um, the privileged communications. So this can be looked at both ways. In law kasi magkaibang treatment nito mga bagay na to. Pero sa social parlance, it's the same. There are things that we agree not to talk about or not to force anyone to say or di ba? Because we understand the danger that it would cause if we allow it. Okay, so we agree that to regulate these things. We agree to regulate these things. So yung slander, kung pinayagan natin yan, sa araw-araw na lang nag-aaway yung mga mag-aasawa, yung mga magkukumpare because konting chismis na siniraan yung kapitbahay sa dala lang ng kalasingan, papatay na sila. So nauubos na yung mga lalaki sa kakasaksakan nila sa isa't isa. Kasi inaalaw yung paninira sa kapwa. So pinagbabawal yan para lang to keep the peace. To keep the peace and public order. Okay, ganun yung libel at slander. And then also culturally, meron tayong tinatawag na amor proprio, yung reputation na hindi lang tayo at kung anong alam natin o ang kaya natin gawin ang may value sa atin in relation to other people. We also have that so-called reputation, yung ating dangal. Okay? At minsan, ang dangal natin ang pinaka-importante dahil minsan, ito lang ang ating kapital sa isang when we embark into something that would that would put premium on a good reputation. Like for example, yung pagiging abogado. Kung masama ang reputasyon mo, ay malamang hindi ka magiging abogado, hindi ka bibigyan ng Supreme Court dahil maraming magreklamo, ay sira ulo yung tao yan. Kahit na hindi ka nakakommit ng krimen, pero ang reputasyon mo ay malala, hindi ka magiging abogado. Hindi ka rin magiging notaryo publiko. Kung may reputasyon ka na hindi maganda. And in other words, there's also a very high value that we put, maybe culturally, on something that we can't even see. I mean, what is reputation? Do you see a person named Reputation walking around and talking to other people? No. It's just an idea. It's in our head. But we put so much premium on it na we actually make laws to protect the cleanliness or the purity of the reputation of people. Okay, so it's important. So mayroong regulation on that one. Okay, but when does it stop? When does a valid regulation or censorship stop? Because it's not censorship kasi ang censorship is pagbawalan ka from speaking at all from the very beginning. So we don't call it censorship, it's just regulation. Okay. When does it now offend the Constitution? When the state stops you from exercising your right to freedom of speech and expression and to publish. When it goes out of the ambit of kung lumabas siya sa saklaw ng libel, ng slander, ng malicious publications, bawal nang gawin ng Estado yan. Okay? So the state has a very big limitation from the exercise of its power to self-defense. And that is those freedoms, di ba? Yun mismo, that those freedoms protect themselves. Kasi pinagbabawalan kaagad nilang gobyerno na gawin ng anything that will that will interfere with the exercise of those three rights. But when it comes to public or to private persons and corporations and organizations, the Constitution does not say anything about that. Okay, the Constitution does not prohibit private organizations from censoring each other. So every member of that organization will be subject to a valid censorship among themselves, among their own organization. Okay, so in a word, and but it is not the final word on it, is that roughly private persons and corporations can actually censor others who are directly related to them in one way or another. They can censor the speech or the expression or the publication of other people within that kind of group or organization or association. So, in malls, kahit na hindi naman bawal mag suot ng shorts sa out there in the public roads, pwede ka pagbawalan ng Shangri-La na magsuot ng fake shorts. Okay? So, pwede yan siyang gawin. And wearing shorts is a form of expression. Hindi ka pwedeng pagbawalan ng estado na suot mo yan sa kalsada, maglakad-lakad ka dyan, magbenta ka ng puto, ganyan, nakasuot ka ng ganyan, okay lang. Pero pag pumasok ka na sa Shangri-La, pwede ka na pagbawalan ng gwardiya dyan. Kasi that's already private property. Okay, so we understand these things. We understand this. But when does it become abuse? Okay, when do private persons and corporations are considered to be crossing the line between exercising their rights to their private property and to their private property basically sa mga korporasyon, dahil pwede ka nilang pagbawalan if you are in the vicinity or inside what they own. Pero when does it become a form of abuse? Okay? Kung halimbawa, magsisensor sila o magbabawal sila ng mga Bisaya. Bawal lang mga Bisaya dito for some reason whatsoever. Technically, the Constitution does not prohibit that. Okay, they can do that. But it becomes abuse because it's no longer reasonable. Wala na siyang rason na bakit Bisaya? Ano bang problema niya sa mga Bisaya? Hindi na siya reasonable na pagbabawal. Okay? So, it becomes abuse. And it's almost always like that kind of example na inaabuso ng isang korporasyon o ng isang private person ang kanyang right to censor other people, and it becomes a violation of the right of those persons, not only in relation to this private corporation but also in general, na parang kung dyan ka nagtatrabaho, hindi ngayon mafa-fire ka kasi Bisaya ka. Okay? And suddenly nagbisaya ka na lang bigla doon sa trabaho mo, mafa-fire ka na lang bigla. Even if there is no valid cause for your firing, mafa-fire ka kasi Bisaya ka. Now that's abuse. That's abuse. But generally, private corporations can censor people who come into the jurisdiction of what they own, of their ownership. Okay, but what about public discourse in relation to Facebook, for example? We know that Facebook has this really weird and parang indistinct na community standards, community rules, na hindi mo alam kung ano ba talagang pinagbabawal dito. What are the standards? I'm just suddenly suspended for 30 days and all that. And my posts were removed. And I am not even given the chance to explain or to question their decision. Okay? Does that still is that still considered a justified exercise of censorship by private corporations? Yes, probably. But what about when everyone in a state or a majority of the people in a nation, in a country, are in that social media platform, and the owner of this social media platform starts to censor people just because it is more in favor of one idea or one group of people with ideas and not in favor of certain people with ideas also, especially when they are opposing each other. Okay, so we can only justify this private persons can censor up to a point because when everyone is having their public discourse on Facebook and Facebook begins to censor the DDS or censor the yellows and whoever in favor of another, and those rules are not even told to you ahead of time, and then suddenly other people are also saying that you can be wrong and isumbong nila sa Facebook and Facebook will also censor you, then I think there's an argument there na hindi na siguro yan saklaw ng allowance ng private corporations and private persons in censorship. Kasi now you are actually effectively depriving this population of Filipinos from having a public discussion. Because when everyone is discussing something or almost everything about their lives in Facebook, and Facebook begins censoring them for whatever reason na hindi maliwanag, that is already like the state um, uh, prohibiting free public discourse. Worse, because Facebook is not Filipino, it's American, it looks like a foreign country or a foreign actor, maybe not the sovereign of that country, not the government, but foreigners anyway, still comes to a country and censors everyone there in their free exercise of public discussion, public discourse. Is that still protected? Is that still allowed? Well, my argument is that no, it's not. But under the law, pwede pa rin gawin ng private institutions na mag-censor. But to me, and it is getting clearer and clearer by the day what's happening in Facebook. I'm only saying Facebook because I'm only on Facebook. I am not on Twitter. Maybe I was registered there, but I'm not using it all the time. I only use it, I think, three times. But Facebook, I do most of my things here, my discussion and all that. And suddenly, I get suspended for the things that I say against some politicians. And I don't even know why. And I would have a valid explanation for saying what I said. But I would be suspended because it's bullying or it's harassing a public official. How can a private citizen harass a public official when that public official is allowed by law to have bodyguards? Sige ka, sabihin mo nga sa akin yan. And they are allowed by law protection by the NBI if they feel really violated or endangered. Di ba? So how is that ever justified? Na isi-censor tayo ng Facebook because we supposedly harassed a public official. It's ridiculous now. It becomes abusive. Di ba? It becomes abusive. So that while it is okay maybe for Facebook to censor certain people, certain Filipinos, but when every Filipino is almost there in Facebook, almost all of them are there, because I think that we are the highest number of people using a Facebook in any given day. It's virtually the venue for the Filipinos' public discourse. And if Facebook does this, you have a situation where the public discourse of the citizenry of a country is being interfered with by a foreign corporate business institution. What the hell is that? Where is now the protection of the constitution of our free speech, expression, and the publication? Wala na. And yet, wala rin tayong solusyon pag ginawa sa atin yan. Wala pa tayong solusyon. But if you ask me kung ano pwedeng gawin, wala tayo sa batas niyan. But I'm not saying walang solusyon dyan. How do we solve private censorship? We solve it, well, we can begin to explore solutions for solving this problem by looking at what exactly is a private censorship. Who does it? And what is the nature of that action? Titingnan natin, these are private companies that are businesses mostly. They are the private pressure groups, yung mga lobbyist, yung mga nagbabawal ng mga babae na nagpapakita ng cleavage, mga miyembro ng simbahan, mga organisasyon ng simbahan katoliko, CBCP, mga ganyan. These are the pressure organizations. They're the pressure groups that that try or attempt to impose their own beliefs and their own rules of what is good and what's bad and what's moral and what's immoral on other people who are not necessarily members of their group. Okay? Because ang unang definition natin is that private persons can only censor, private entities can only censor other private persons if they are connected to each other somehow by some reason. Like for example, we are connected because I'm the owner of the mall and you are in my mall. So we are connected. You are a visitor in my house or in my property. But here, anong pakialam ng CBCP sa mga Muslim na nasa-censor dito? Dahil may sinasabi sa na-offend yung simbahan ng Katoliko. Anong connection nila dyan? Wala. Okay? Anong connection ng Facebook at sa akin when I speak about Philippine politics, when Facebook is not Filipino? And how would they know our culture? How would they know what is moral to us? And more so, when they censor us by using some kind of algorithm, some kind of robot that is an app, that is an application, that is a program, that does not even consider anything else but certain appearance of words in your post. See, it's no longer a reasonable exercise of private censorship. Okay, so now we can already complain about that. Can already complain about that because now we are virtually being denied our rights of freedom to speak, to publish, and to express by a corporation that does not have anything to do with us other than their need to advertise on our own accounts. So, kumikita sila dyan sa atin at pinagbawalan pa tayo ng ating constitutionally protected rights in the Philippines just because they're a private corporation. Is that still fair to you? Is that still fair to you? Di ba? It's crazy. But, again, ang objective nitong ating session ngayong gabi is just to show you that there is a problem here. That maybe not everyone sees it, but not everyone takes it seriously. But there are also people who have been actually and physically harmed because of what's going on in Facebook. Okay? When they are yung minamas report, and that would end up actual confrontations in person, mga ganyan. And sometimes other people will lose their opportunities in business because they were mass reported. And they use their Facebook account in business, in selling something there every day. Pero minas report dahil nagkataong DDS siya or dilaw siya. But I don't remember any DDS mass reporting anyone just because he is a supporter of Leonel Bredo. Most of the time, yung mga DDS yung nako-complain eh. Not only that, even the government offices were mass reported by these people. And then there's the accusations of being a troll and all that stuff. Diba? Imagine, you can accuse one or two or three or a group of people, but you cannot accuse the entire the entire majority of a country who voted and made a candidate win. You just can't call them trolls and expect favor given to your side and against trolls that you're saying that you're talking about. So, but that is somehow their attitude, that they can just call all the 31 million or however how many those are who voted for Ferdinand Marcos and Jr. and Sara Duterte. Just by merely calling them trolls, they are trying to invalidate the democratic process of an election in this country. And that happens in a in a platform of social media, and those people who have been called trolls are now being deprived of their right to even defend themselves, even to reason out that I am not one of those people. I did not say these things. I did not do this to you. Just because I voted for or I am in favor of this candidate doesn't mean that I did something to you. Di ba? That's prejudice. So now all of these things come together in this whole thing in a small matter like social media account in Facebook. And yet, our our representatives in government, the president, the vice president, all the officials and the departments, and our lawmakers are not listening to us. They are not listening to us. They are not doing anything about it. But now our job, you and me and all those people who will listen to us, our job now is to make them understand that this problem goes into the very heart of our Constitution. It goes to the very heart of the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights contains all those freedoms we are talking about. That is our job. And we can only do that in a free public forum, in a free public discourse. If we cannot do that on social media, and we cannot do that en masse, I mean, many of us are not allowed to do that, maybe there's something to complain about. Maybe we can ask the government to do something about it. Or maybe it will give a motivation to enterprising people to put up an alternative to Facebook. And it's a really nice justification for leaving Facebook because of its abuses. And Facebook won't really want that. Facebook won't really like that. Why? Because if there is a sizable number of people leaving Facebook, that also means a sizable number of kita from advertisement would be leaving Facebook. Okay? So, how can we fight corporate censorship, abusive corporate censorship in Facebook? By being here, by staying here, by by taking our chances at saying what we want, saying what we think is justified, even if they take it as offensive or against their standards that we do not know what they are. And when there are so many of us that many of us are being added to the group, it will become a critical mass such that when we decide all of us to leave, Facebook will be feeling some pain. It will be feeling some pain. Okay? Hold on. May kumakatok. I'm live. Right? So that's what I'm talking about. That's what we learned today. Maybe the Constitution does not have a concrete solution for us when it comes to private censorship, but we are the solution. The more of us who understand these things come together and stand up against this, the more a threat we become to Facebook when we decide to leave. Hi to the Secretary Presumptive. Andyan siya. Do you want to talk to her? I'm almost done. That's it. So, how do we fight it? Who fights private censorship? We are. We are doing that. Either we help someone enterprising to put up his alternative Facebook, and then we decide to just leave this place. Either way, however we do it, maybe the government does it for us. May gagawin ng office ng itong si Bossing to help that come to reality, and we decide to go by that decision, then Facebook will be harmed. And they will realize that their censorship is doing something wrong, not only to us, but also to itself. Okay? So let's think about that. Let's think about that, and we continue this discussion of what is public discourse, what is good for, and what is censorship and all that stuff in the incoming live streams we're going to do. Meanwhile, I will give the chair to
The chair.
your idol.
My idol.
Here she is.
Ang liit po.
Adjustment.
Ayan, nag-adjustment.
Yeah.
Ay,
Yeah.
ay, magandang gabi. Ako po si Trixie Cruz-Angeles. Paano ba to? Paano ba yung camera? What did you talk about?
Private censorship.
A private censorship. Ang sinasabi kasi ni Attorney Awesome is that, ayun, that censorship can happen both by government and by private persons, di ba? But that we should resist it in all forms. Halimbawa, yung sinasabi ng ating saligang batas kasi na bawal kapag gobyerno. Diba? No law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, expression, or of the press. Which reminds me, may nakita ako kanina. Sa Twitter yata, sabi sa Twitter, oy, tinagpa ako. Oy, at Luminous Tricks, pakinggan mo to. Kasi this guy said, nakalagay daw sa saligang batas na special daw talaga ang mga journalists. Sininggle out. Kasi sabi daw ng saligang batas, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of the press. Syempre, of the press. So parang hindi niya naintindihan na it says three things. It said, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, or of the press. Na bakit tatlo yan? Ayon dun sa professor ko sa UP, sa law noon, may kwento eh. Sabi niya, during the deliberations, ang isa dun sa framers ng ating saligang batas ay yung movie director, si Lino Broca. So originally, the provision said only, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech. Kasi included na sa speech yung expression at saka of the press. Pero nag-insist siya, hindi. Para daw maliwanag, lahat ipasok of speech, of expression, and of the press. So, pero apparently, yung tao na nag-post na yon, akala niya, sinisingle out yung media as a specially protected group. Hindi totoo yun. Kasi nga, katulad ng sinasabi natin madalas, sino pa ba ngayon ang press? Kasi ang press, dati kaya nga tinawag na press ay dahil sa paglilimbag. Yun, pag ito yung paglilimbag, pag-imprenta. So, it later on came to mean itong mga namamahayag. Whether ang pagpapahayag ay sa TV networks, sa radyo, o sa ano.
Explanation dyan is this.
Lapit ka dito.
Yung freedom of, sige mo. Yeah. Yung freedom of speech at saka expression, these are personal freedoms. But in the exercise of the freedom of the journalists to publish their things out there, some middleman has to be involved. Kasi not every journalist has the money to be able to print in mass the product of his mind, which is their short stories, a news article. Wala siyang capacity to do that, to mass produce it for many people to read. So that right is extended to that printer, that publisher. Kasi otherwise, that body cannot validly seek protection by using the right of another private person. So it's extended to him because it is yung ginagawa ng printer kay ng press is so innately part of the exercise of the freedom of that journalist to express or to publish, such that in-extend yung right sa press.
Doon sa publisher.
Yes, sa publisher.
So naglilimbag.
Yes.
O nagpapahayag.
But now that everyone can publish himself, you do not need a printer anymore, then you are also the press.
Correct. So, kaya nga, But in no way can you interpret the constitutional provision to mean that only the media or that the media are a specially protected class.
Of course not.
Ibig sabihin, lahat ng tao na lahat ng tao mayroong karapatan na magsalita at magpahayag. So, protektado tayo sa ganon. Pero kung titignan nyo yung paglalagay dun sa saligang batas, ang nakalagay dun is, no law shall be passed. Ay sino ang nagpapasa ng batas? Hindi ba yung gobyerno, yung estado? In fact, pag tinignan niyo lahat ng nakalagay doon, nakalahad doon sa Article 3 ng ating saligang batas or the Bill of Rights, ito ay mga limitasyon sa gobyerno, sa estado. Hindi pwede gawin ng estado ito. Hindi pwede gumawa ang estado ng batas na nagpipigil sa ating karapatan na magsalita o magpahayag. So, maliban lang, nag-provide naman siya ng mga exceptions. So, maliban lang dun sa mga existing na batas. Halimbawa, bawal yung libel, bawal yung inciting to terrorism, bawal ang inciting to sedition, inciting to rebellion, false publications. Mga bawal yon. Na pag tinignan ninyo, kung ano yung mga pinagbabawal na yon, libel, sedition, inciting to sedition, and so on, makikita nyo na kaya yung pinagbabawal ay dahil nakakakos siya ng damage. Libel, halimbawa, na sisiraan yung reputasyon ng isang tao. So, magagawan ng paraan ng hukuman para ma-determine yung damage at kailangan i-address yung damage na yon. Kadalasan civil suit yan, ang pambayad para sa damage ay of course pera, danyos. Okay? Sa ibang bansa, hindi na siya kriminal. Sa atin, kriminal pa rin. Pero, pagka nag-evolve na yan further, dahil gusto ng Korte Suprema, ay civil na lang yung liability, damage pa rin ang pinag-uusapan natin, damages. Tingnan niyo, inciting to sedition, inciting to rebellion, at inciting to terrorism. Pagka, ang damage dyan ay yung danger to the state. Pinoprotektahan kasi ng ating batas yung integridad ng ating estado, ng ating bayan. So, yung mga sedition, rebellion, ganyan, it endangers the state and the state has a right to protect itself. So, yung false publications, pag tinignan ninyo, ano yan, may damage din yan. Ang damage is to the public interest. Pero kung yung salita nyo ay hindi naman nakaka-damage, hindi nakaka-endanger ng estado, hindi nakaka-endanger ng ibang tao, di ba yung pag sumigaw ka ng sunog sa loob ng sinehan, papanish yan eh. Kasi may damage or may tendency to cause damage kasi pagka nag-stampede dyan sa palabas ay maraming masasaktan. So, yun yung puntirya kung bakit may times na nililimita ang freedom of expression and of the press. So, hindi pa rin sila special. Hindi pa rin natin sinasabi na, uy, itong mga journalists na to, kailangan meron tayong mga batas dahil ipupuntirya natin sila as a very especially protected class. Unlike yung ibang sinasabi sa saligang batas, women, children, indigenous people, the elderly, kaya may senior citizens law tayo, the handicap, and so on. Pinupuntirya ito ng ating saligang batas, especially protected classes. Kasi ibig sabihin, kasi ang society has to protect the weakest of its kind.
Okay. So,
Yung determination ng civilization natin, yung level of civilization natin, is when we are capable of protecting the weakest members.
in addition, in the world of expressing, of speaking, and of publishing, ano ang weakness ng mga journalist when their power is there? Their power is the protection of their speech, their freedom of the press and of expression. Pag i-regulate mo yan, you will violate the constitutional provision on Article 3. Di ba? And that is precisely why walang nagre-regulate sa mga journalists. Because when you regulate journalism, you violate the Constitution. Why? Because the Constitution, when it's not followed, will diminish the power of the journalist in the entire fight that they are in. So it is to their advantage that they are not regulated, because otherwise they will lose their power. So hindi nila alam anong sinasabi nila. Hindi nila alam anong sinasabi nila. They do not want special protection. Why? Because it will diminish their power. It will diminish their freedom.
So, ayun. Sabi ni Pablito, ito tingnan niya. Bakit tayo nagtatalo sa mga batas? Kasi ang batas, matapos ipasa ilalagay sa libro, ilalagay sa library, hindi man lang makakaabot sa mga kasulok-sulukan ng barangay. Dapat nga bawat batas ay nakalimbag sa kung anong wika natin at bawat na naipapasa ay kailangan maipaabot sa mga barangay para maintindihan. Maraming batas na nasasabing, meron palang ganun batas. Ay, mali po kayo. Bihira ko sabihin yan. Pero mali po kayo. Unang-una, talagang nililimbag yan. Pangalawa, talaga pong isinasalin sa wikang Filipino. Hindi lang po madalas na nakikita natin yung version na yon. Pero meron po yan. Automatic yan pag pinasa yung batas, nililimbag yan sa wikang Filipino. Kasi nakasaad din sa ating saligang batas na national language natin yon. So yung mga madalas humirit dyan na, bakit kayo nag-i-English? Mga Pilipino naman tayo, pakibasa na lang yung saligang batas. Kasi nakalagay din doon na sa isa sa official languages natin, ang Ingles, ang wikang Ingles. Hanggat nandyan yan sa ating saligang batas, kapag nilimbag rin naman ng mga batas sa wikang Ingles, it is considered valid. Ang importante yung publication niya. Okay, ngayon, yung sinasabi ninyo, kailangan naka-imprenta yan, pero hindi naman daw po nababasa. Dapat daw alam ng lahat ng mga taong mga ganito. Ibig sabihin, actually, mali yun eh. Kasi by convenience, yung batas, once na-publish yan sa newspaper of general circulation or sa official gazette, considered na tayong lahat alam natin yan. Hindi natin pwedeng i-require na kailangan bawat isa sa atin na basa natin yung batas regardless of the level of understanding bago mag-apply yan mga yan sa atin. Kasi otherwise, magiging excuse. O bakit mo pinatay yung tao? Malay ko ba? Hindi ko naman alam na may batas na paparusahan yung mga pumatay. So, huwag niyo pong i-assume na walang ganyan. Meron po. Nililimbag at sinasalin sa wikang Filipino. So, kaya nga meron tayong mga ang nag-check pa nga niyan, ang komisyon ng wikang Filipino. So, for accuracy. So, ang yung mga nagsasabing, meron palang ganung batas, that's the reason nga there are people who specifically study the law. That's why you cannot then say na, kaya kong gawin yan, abogado yun, basa lang yan. Ako, research ko, alam ko na yan. It doesn't, there's a reason, it's studied. So, you can't dismiss the reason for institutions and for people going to school for 4 years to know what the law is. One more question. Silent listener here, sabi ni Ma'am Juliet. But I just thought of something. If you notice our own airport, bakit English? It seems nasa Chinese din. Ba't ganun? Di ba dapat English and Tagalog? Sorry, out of topic. Well, first of all, it isn't Tagalog, it's Filipino. So, yung debate, merong mga tao pinipilit nila yung debate na yung Filipino ay Tagalog rin. Pero, dun sa mga dalubhasa na nag-aaral ng wika, ang tawag sa amin, linguists, kasi may science po ang wika, nag-evolve na siya, magkaiba na siya. So magkaibang wika na siya. Although meron pang parang mutual intelligibility, it really has become a language already. Ang may kahinaan lang po, kasi dapat nung ginagawa natin yung ating wikang pambansa, dapat meron ding isinasama na mga galing sa ibang wika, katulad ng Bisaya, ng Hiligaynon, ng Ibatan, ng Tausug. It was supposed to amalgamate all of the languages or evolve words from other languages. Okay? Ngayon, bakit sinasalin sa ibang wika katulad ng Chinese? Kasi para sa turista yon. Ibig sabihin, na-acknowledge natin na may mga travelers dito sa ating bansa na nanggagaling sa ibang bansa. No man is an island na po tayo.
Nagdadala ng
And in
pera
fact,
dito.
there was a time, lalo-lalo na itong Duterte administration, dumami talaga ang mga turistang galing sa China at ito ay dahil meron talagang polisiya ang kanilang bansa na paghihikayat na isa sa mga tourism destinations nila ay dito sa Pilipinas. So yun lang po yun. Kasi ang sinasabi nga natin is that totoo yun, yung concern ninyo na hindi ba dapat English at saka Filipino because we must have the ability to speak to each other. Kaya nga po meron tayong national language na merong mga tao na gusto pa nilang debatihin ito. Na bakit Tagalog ang naging base, bakit hello, 1935 pa po yung debate na yon. Hindi ko sinasabi na hindi valid yung debate na yon, pero nevertheless, we work with what we have. Okay? Pero we don't just talk to each other eh. Global na tayo, 'di ba? Miyembro tayo ng global community. So why shouldn't we put it in other languages? It's simply an acknowledgement na marami tayong turista na naggagaling sa China. Eto. Sabi ni Malord, isama po sana attorney sa K-12 education kahit basics lang ng Philippine Constitution. Madam, sir. Sir ba? Hindi ko alam eh. Okay. Kasama po talaga siya. Ginawa pong subject sa parang senior year yung pag-aaral ng ating saligang batas. Pati po sa kolehiyo, bahagi na din po ng basic curriculum or sa parang gen ed subjects ang ang pag-aaral ng saligang batas. So, it's already there. Andun na po yun. Sabi ni Ma'am Julia, thank you for the clarification. I really love watching your videos. Marami akong natutunan po sa inyo. Ito, sabi ni Ian, nice to see you once again. Sana po one last solo vlog before po kayo umupo sa PCOO. Na-miss po namin kayo dito sa Luminous. Naku sir, hindi ako titigil. And as a matter of fact, tinitingnan natin how we can continue to vlog kahit nakaupo na po. Hindi po kami pinagbabawal. Ang ano lang is that since I will be talking already in a different capacity, hindi na po ako basta private person after after June 30, then, I have to be watchful na hindi misinterpret yung sinasabi ko kasi kinatawan na ako by that time. I will be representing the agency, the office, at saka yung ating, of course, the administration. So, baka ihiwalay lang natin yung live, pero pwede naman ako mag-guesting. In the same way na pwede ako mag-guest sa mga TV shows, bakit naman ako hindi pwede mag-guest sa
And you can
Luminous?
talk about
Diba?
food.
Plus, I can
But-
talk about other things.
Food.
Pwede pa rin natin pag-usapan itong mga ganito. So, ah, tama ba po yung ginagawa ng rapid tool po na trial by publicity, yung nilalabas niya yung muka at name ng nirereklamo without consent? Medyo
Medyo may problema eh.
slightly problematic ako with that kasi 'di ba every person is entitled to due process.
Data privacy do.
May mga data privacy restrictions pa yung mga ganon. The format kasi of their show came at a time when it was still acceptable.
And it was mostly against the government. The police, the
Kasi
abusive officials.
ang inaano nila din no ay ang chine-check nila ay mga government officials. It's a different matter when it's a private person. Katulad ngayon sa libel, di ba sinasabi natin, ang malis, presumed yan kapag private yung tao, pribadong individual. Pero kapag gobyerno, official o public figure na yung pinag-uusapan, kailangan natin patunayan yung malis. Come here, baby. Merong naglalambing na big dog. Ay, hindi ka nakikita sa camera, big dog. Ayan. Paano natin? You want to show up in the camera, baby? Look. Si hi daw sabi ni... Eh, hindi nakikita. Yan mo. Ilong lang yung nakita. Okay, sir. Come here, come here. Hindi ba ganun?
Yan.
Come here, sir. Come here,
Yan.
come here. Say hi. Say hi to everybody. There you go. Say hi. Say hi, big dog. There. Look, look, look. Hi. Come here, closer. Come here, closer. There you go. There you go. No. No.
Ayan na. Ayan na. Ang laki-laki niyan.
Yes. Ah!
Come on, come on. Come on, Jimmy.
Go.
Come on.
Go. There's your doggy snacks. So, ayan.
Hey.
Sit. Ayan, umupo na. Umupo
Down,
na.
down,
Down,
down.
sit. There, good dog.
Down, Kirby.
Akala niya kasi chewing toy yung arm ko eh. Since na-mention si Tulfo, legal po ba that they're giving away money sa program niya using the money ng ACSI yata yun? Correct me if I'm wrong. Curious lang po. Ay, hindi. I wish I knew. But I don't know what ACSI is po. So, off the top of my head. Okay. Ito, how about sa kay Rambo Talabong ng Rappler, panay negative publicity ang ginagawa niya sa gobyerno. Okay. Di ba ang sabi nga sa ating saligang batas, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, or of the press. So, ibig sabihin, hindi natin sila pwedeng i-regulate. They can basically say anything they want to say as long as hindi siya libelous, hindi siya inciting to sedition, inciting to rebellion, inciting to terrorism, and so on. So, ibig sabihin malawak talaga yung scope ng ating kalayaan magsalita at magpahayag. So, we feel that something is wrong, but the law says that they're allowed to do that. Eh, ang mas pagtaka is, bakit they're allowed to do that against the government, but we are not allowed to praise it. Di ba? Nagagalit sila. Ay, itong mga Dutertards, mga trolls, bayaran, ganyan. If we say something nice, or we support the government, nagagalit sila. So, yun yung weird. Kung sila, allowed sila magsalita to negatively affect the government, for those of us who want to support it, nagagalit naman sila. So, that's really unusual. Okay? Okay, last talaga kasi parang 1.5 hours na kayo pala nandito. Hi, kay Ma'am Ivy. Sabi niya, na-miss, nice to see you again. Ito, last. Sabi ni Ma'am Judith, I like your nude makeup look. Regards to attorney. Wala pong makeup today. Maniwala man kayo. Wala po talaga makeup today. Today yung mga no makeup days ko kasi tinatamad ako maglagay ng makeup. So, it's sunscreen po. Tinted sunscreen.
At saka yung filter siguro.
And the filter po. Ito, sabi ni Pablito, kung hindi po pwedeng i-regulate ang mga journalists, di ba pwedeng i-prohibit na lang? Grabe! So, yan. Antok na tong si Sir Berus so papaalam na rin kami. Maraming salamat sa pagsubaybay sa Luminous nitong araw na ito. Maraming salamat sa pasensya nyo kay Attorney Osang. So, at maraming salamat sa tuloy-tuloy na pagtatambay sa aming Luminous, sa pag-join dun sa tambayan namin na on leave pa ako for now. So, pero wala namang pong bawal, pwede akong mag-guest. So, ibig sabihin, makikita nyo pa rin ako paminsan-minsan sa tambayan, sa karambola, pagka may oras, at saka dito sa Luminous sa ating mga live. Tapos pagka pwede na po kami isi-set up yung social media, ng Office of the Press Secretary, then then we will also see you more often there. At si Attorney Awesome naman ang i-guest namin dun. So, maraming salamat and enjoy your evening. Anong oras na ba? Oh my gosh, it's 11:30. Good night, everybody. Thank you for watching. At saka sa lahat ng nagpadala ng stars at saka nagpadala sa ating super chat, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Say bye. Say good night. Bye
Bye.
talaga, kamay mo lang ang nakikita. Good
Bye na.
night.
Okay. Ako nang bahala dyan.